Hey guys, I am Sean Bartley here with the Comics Pals, and we made a special trip all the way out to Brooklyn, which is, for me, I mean, just forget about it, uh, to come to a special comic book shop called Anyone Comics and interview the store owner, Dimitrios. How's it going on this beautiful Sunday, Dimitrios?
Good. It's quite a beautiful frigid Sunday. It's great.
Yeah, really, really cold. But this place hasn't been cold. It's actually been very warm in terms of people walking in, picking up comics, and I can see that there's a relationship that the people that shop here have with you. And that's something that's immediately unique, in my opinion, in my experience, because for me, my local shop is Midtown, which is like Walmart.
Hmm.
But this place has like a culture unto itself. Downstairs, there's an art class going on with children,
Yeah.
and that's not something I've ever seen before. So, can you speak a little bit about what you feel makes this shop unique?
Uh, yeah. So when we opened up close to 3 years ago, being in New York City, I was looking at what comic stores exist and what I would want in them um, that we didn't have. What I would have wanted as a kid, also. And so part of it was just creating more community-oriented events and stuff. Like I would have wanted to know more about what's happening behind the scenes in comics and comics instruction. So we got the art classes so that kids at an early age can understand the craft and understand that this is a medium that can be placed into their hands, that they have control over, that's much more attainable than maybe film, and other things. Um, uh, and the other thing was being interested in creating comics myself. I tried to create a space for indie creators as well. So we do a lot of events to kind of uh, capture the spirit of comic creation, which to me is inherently like just an independent guerrilla form of art. So we do 24-hour comics here. We host that. I think we're the only place in New York City that does that. We have drink and draws where people, where we bring in models and people draw models and stuff. Um, what else do we do? What other events do we have? Oh, we do D&D. I know that there aren't too many gaming places, although they've been increasing the last couple of years, so that's great. But I know that there was a need for um, fandom from Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. So even though I don't partake in it, I want to have a space for other types of art as well. There's one incident 2-3 years ago, um, and let me know if I'm rambling too much here. So Damian Scott, who's a Brooklyn-based artist, created Cassandra Cain, um, and most recently worked on Miles Morales at the end. He had started working on a book called Excel. I reached out to him, and just to see if he wanted to do a signing, and he offered to spray paint our gate, which has a huge Spider-Man graffiti thanks to him. But because of that, he has connections to the graffiti world, and so I was reached out to by his friends about creating an art gallery downstairs. So they spray painted the entire space and they put some framed images of artwork by graffiti artists, writers, and stuff. And for a week, maybe longer, there was an art gallery for graffiti art, and and again, like, I'm not familiar with it, but I very much felt like I was in the shoes of my mom there, where it's an artwork I don't understand, but I can see how much people loved it. It was a huge turnout, our poorest comic sales ever, but I respect the fact that people had a forum for an artwork that they don't usually have curated to them and stuff. So it was a really great experience stuff. Even now, I get occasional, if I'm getting a bacon, egg, and cheese, someone will say, "Hey, it's the graffiti guy, graffiti store." Even though I'm not that, but yeah.
So, when you were growing up, how did you get into comics? What was your comic book shop like?
So I grew up in the Bronx, actually. There was a comic book store. I forgot the name of it, but I remember it was near uh, the Globe Theater, which was an adult movie theater across the street from the Bronx Zoo. And there was a comic store right there. So it was a lot of getting those early Marvel trading cards for $1, or getting some of the Marvel Tales reprints for $1, or getting a 3-pack from the 99-cent store, which would have two good comics and a terrible comic in the middle. Um, Yeah, so there was so slowly I just kind of grew my collection. I think from the cards and just from the random snippets, I enjoyed reading about kind of the mythology, and I let my imagination run wild on what that world would be like. And every single comic book I would pick up afterwards would be a larger glimpse into that world, into the world of Marvel or into the world of DC Comics and stuff. You know, the cards were a little bit more descriptive, like Wikipedia entries and stuff. Sometimes inaccurate, though I found. Yeah, it was really fun to like get like it was funner I think to find out about characters I didn't know about than to read about characters I did know about. You know.
And I think being in this store, one of the things that I noticed is such a strong focus on indie comics. I mean, behind us, there's quite a few indie comics. There's an indie showcase over here at the rack.
Yeah.
We'll show all that stuff. And so I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that you were more interested in learning about characters you didn't know about because there is such a strong focus here. How do you feel that your consumer base enjoys those books? Do you get a lot of people who come for the more niche books that they can't find anywhere
Yeah.
else?
The biggest challenge that we have in the store is getting people into comics. That's why we came up with the name Anyone Comics. I learned through my years working retail that the easiest way to sell something is by using as few words as possible. So I said if we put it in the name of the store, Anyone Comics, someone could come through the door. There's a chance that they'll come through the door and say, "Hey, I'm anyone. Let me see what this is about." But then the next step is breaking down that barrier that comics are that one thing. They're the superhero movies. So we do get people who come in for maybe certain niche books that they won't find in other stores, but more of it is getting people who are, let's say, reading the X-Men stuff written by Jonathan Hickman into East of West by Hickman or into Black Monday Murders by Hickman. You know, like understanding that there's more, like just creative, singular visions out there by the same creators who are taking a stab at their characters. You know what I mean? Kate's has been an easy one to get people into other stuff of his. Yeah.
So you mentioned your relationship with Damian Scott, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other creators who kind of come and bring their books or do signings and things like that?
Yeah, sure. It's been mostly independent artists. I mean, a lot of Brooklyn-based artists do their events here. We have Adam Kubert coming in. He's I don't want to get into people's personal business or anything like that. But let's just say it's easy for him to get to the store. I see. Similarly, Kari Randolph, who did Excellence, he did a signing here for the trade a month ago. Vita Ayala frequently stops by here. Yeah. I would say this neighborhood in particular, Crown Heights, is like a very creative neighborhood, and there's a lot of artists here, and then there's friends of artists visiting those artists who just stop by just on a regular basis and stuff. Stephen Harris, indie creators you guys pointed out is Nana, Greg, Elise comes here. I don't know. Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, there's a bunch of artists who are just like we don't necessarily seek out the creators, but for a lot of them, it's just convenient that we're here for them. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think having the ability to come to a place like this that does support those kinds of books so strongly, it's a boon because you can come in and maybe the audience that comes here is more interested in that kind of stuff because of the culture here.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people, again, so a lot of my customers are people who just got into comic books for the first time, and again, they may not have a scope on who Adam Kubert is or any of the other creators that we host, but at the same time, they get one when they see people coming out from all over. They gain an appreciation. A lot of the signings here are a lot more casual, and so people spend time. I noticed talking to the fans about the craft and stuff, which is really amazing, which is great, which is more than I could ask for, honestly. Yeah, so I think that appreciation grows here, or at least we try to help it grow here.
So when I first met you, you told me something that I thought was really interesting about the sales numbers for Marvel and DC versus everything else. Can you speak to kind of what that looks like here? What's unique about the sales numbers here versus a lot of other places?
They're not the majority. Neither of them are the majority sales. I keep worrying about if we start getting more of a Marvel fan base, if it becomes a dominant thing, then and if Marvel decides one day just on a whim to stop printing books and stuff, we're screwed. We would be screwed hypothetically, but frankly, there's enough interest in indie books that we can steer people towards that direction, or even take it to the next level and steer it towards local artists who just maintain their releases. One example being Tales of the Night Watchman. Dave is a regular customer here. He puts out his Tales of the Night Watchman book regularly himself for the most part. So yeah, just the fact that the numbers haven't gone very heavy to the big two, which I'm like really thankful for, honestly.
What do you think is the relation? What do you think the relationship needs to be between someone who reads comics and the store that they go to? Because I think that relationship is important. You guys are very much the middlemen between us and the creators, us and these big corporations. What do you try to bring to that relationship to make people want to be here?
Um, it's so in the age of Amazon and online shopping, uh, retailers should at this point embrace the fact that if somebody takes a step into your store, it's a choice. So you don't need to worry about undercutting, like competing with Amazon price or anything like that. It's clearly they're looking for an experience that something like online doesn't offer, which, you know, in other words, a store is an experience in itself. Like that ability to browse, we've kind of lost that Blockbuster or small independent video store, Kim's Videos thing, where you can find like these weird horror movies and stuff, weird sci-fi movies. But comic books have kind of maintained that. I think I don't think there's any obligation by the fans. I think there's okay. I'm a little bit torn. I'm 50-50 in this one. I think people who are committed to comics, who have a commitment to comics, one of the things they should do is just go out of their way to promote comics outside of comic book fans. I think that's one of the biggest things. But the relationship between a comic store and a comic book fan customer shouldn't be obligatory. It shouldn't be a relationship that's that you're kind of just one is relying on the other one, where one can feel one would feel guilty if they don't do their share. So a store should be just making sure that's a place people want to be at, and again, on the fan end, maybe at most they should just make sure that they talk to their friends who aren't into comics, just to give comic books a chance and comic stores a chance to grow a little bit.
So you spoke about sort of what your aspirations were when you opened the store.
Yeah.
But how did you come to the point where you decided this is what I'm going to do? I want to be a comic book shop owner.
So I worked. Let me see. I'm on an NDA, so I don't know what I could share. But yeah, some of it's like, most of it's known. So anyway, whatever. I worked at Midtown Comics for 10 years, and
I remember you.
okay. So so at some point, when as a manager, I realized there wasn't much more upward growth, and I also realized I had no other practical skills except for comic retail. Like I couldn't just suddenly be a doctor or a lawyer, nor did I have the interest or attention span to engage the stuff needed to shift my careers. So the next logical thing was to set up a store again, create a store that I wanted to see. I have friends there. I love Midtown Comics. I had some ideas rejected there completely, with good reason. But I decided to just, again, like kind of implement more of my theories here, and they're paying off. I'll say that a lot of what set up the store, I don't think I could have set up a store like this without the experience I gained at Midtown Comics. But at the same time, I think a lot of my own personal, um, you know, biases, fandoms took this store to the level that other stores may not be able to reach at the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I, I guess, what do you feel about the where the industry is at right now? Because I think we're at a critical point in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of conversation on the internet about that. So, as someone who's in the trenches,
Yeah.
what's your perspective?
I think the first thing we need to do is respect each other. Working in comics, in writing, in art, in retail, in editing, in podcasting, in journalism, none of it is lucrative. And there's just no way anyone's doing it that doesn't love it. You know what I mean? Like the people who are doing it to make easy cash, they're gone. They're there for like a few months and then they're gone. They realize that it's not going anywhere and they're gone. Um, I'm going to argue that you guys are in the trenches too. I think everyone's in the trenches in this one. Um, but because everyone cares, I don't think I honestly don't think we have anything to worry about. Comics are going to sustain themselves. If Disney decides, hey, let's take all the money we put into printing comics and do another Ant-Man movie, which will be much more lucrative, 100%. I think the editors, the creators will still want to do something different. I think they'll create something different. I think you're always seeing new publishers coming in. Some of them fail, some of them go on. But at the end of it, they're all doing it because they care about this medium, they care about the industry, and they want to grow. And as long as at the root of it, you know, if the speculators fall off because they stop making money from this stuff, if the movie script writers who aren't getting their movies made fall off of this, at the core of it, there's people who love this stuff and will keep it all alive, no matter what. I think.
I like that. So, one of the things that you mentioned a little earlier was the trouble with getting people to sort of, maybe pivot away from House of X or X-Men onto some of Jonathan Hickman's other stuff. What are some of the strategies that you use to sort of pivot people to read other things?
There's not one strategy. You kind of need to engage every customer on their own terms. You can't really force somebody to move away from Marvel. You have to wait for them to say, like, maybe come in and say, "What? Nothing? No X-Men book this week?" Which is never going to happen ever again, apparently. But and then you just say, like, well, no, but here's this book which is similar, or by Benjamin Percy, or this book by who else is writing these days? Was it Leia Williams? Here's this book by etc. You create the culture, you create the environment where fans aren't necessarily engaging you. Maybe that's their introduction, but then they start engaging each other. I'm gonna say that one of the best. We have 3 employees here, but other than myself, but the best salespeople in the store are fans talking to each other about books. So if they connect under the same book, they'll ask each other inevitably what else they're reading. Like for me, almost everything's a sales pitch. If I'm stuck with extra copies of Marvel's X, it's a good book. Let me just say that, but I will also push it a little bit more. Right. But then if it's coming from somebody else who's reading it, then there's going to be something a little bit more genuine there. As long as people are talking to each other, then they'll be more open to trying something new. I find it's opportunity and just timing. I think is opportunity is timing. It's just creating that environment where they're coming back to, and then having that opportunity for it to happen. And there'll be more than one opportunity too.
One of the things that I noticed that I've never seen before is you have these sort of tags that showcase when something is like a good jumping on point. Yeah. That is something I've never seen. Mm-hmm. What inspired that?
Just that, like people wondering where they could start a story. Especially with the Marvel DC books, it's not necessarily with an issue number 1. They could be starting a new storyline at a later issue. Spawn definitely needs jumping on point tags and stuff. But again, like almost everything that happens in the store has been a kind of equation, like what's missing on one end and what do we introduce to get that equity on the other end. Um, the idea with jumping on points is that sometimes New Yorkers were historically antisocial, so people don't want to talk to me. That's absolutely fine. But we want to create like a marker, a guideline for people who do want to browse on their own and not have somebody on their back asking, trying to direct them towards books and stuff.
So one of the challenges that something like Amazon, like you said, doesn't face is the fact that they don't have a storefront.
Right.
So
Rent.
yeah, well, among other things, right?
Yeah.
But you guys need to attract people to the store. You need to get people inside. What are some of the tactics that you use in this digital age where you can advertise online and things like that to get people to come?
For the most part, because digital is getting more and more monotonized, it seems to be more alienating. Word of mouth has been much more efficient than anything else. I try to engage in non-traditional, but both comic book and non-comic book events. For example, Comic Cons. Obviously, you want to have some representation, local Comic Con, so that people know that your store is here. But we would leave flyers and stuff in like just other community staples, cafes, barbershops, taco joints, libraries. Ray, who teaches our art class, he goes to a library event once a year where he does his art class and then advertises the store. The other thing is when we host events like the Graffiti Art Gallery, but also a monthly comedy show, things that aren't necessarily comic books. People come in and they may not get anything now, but hopefully down the line if somebody brings up a comic book in their life, they'll say, "Oh, there's a comic book store over here." You know what I mean? Like, right. It's you do. I would say that there is just a lot of physical, or there's just a lot of work just for what's perceived as little reward, but it all adds up in the end. You know what I mean? Like you're working, you're pushing. I don't know, this metaphor might be terrible, but you're pushing a large rock to get a pebble at the end. But then when you get a bunch of pebbles, it accumulates to something.
So this is worth it for you.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm doing something I love. As I said, like, it's sure I don't have health insurance, and it's we're getting paid minimum wage here, and sometimes I don't give myself hours, but I'm doing something I love, and I think a lot of people who were in better paying positions would trade their position for mine at this point.
I think I would. Do you worry about digital comics at all? Do you ever think about that?
No. Again, when people come in, it's kind of a choice. I think people have been pulling out of digital comics. I actually think digital comics have been helping comic sales in general. Think about it this way, right? There's this culture, this kind of obligation to reading everything to keep up, right? If you're reading 20 issues of Marvel, you really only care about 3 issues. Like you're reading all these Marvel books, but you really care about Immortal Hulk and X-Men, right? So if you stick to digital, you don't feel like you own it, and you truly don't. It's not, unless you live in the Matrix, you don't own that stuff. It's not physical for you. And so I know that people go out of their way to then collect that stuff if they care about it. And then, again, if we have that experience where they want to come back, they'll then move back into that. I could tell you that a tangible example was Ed Pisker's Grand Design.
Yeah.
People loved it, and then they just wanted to own it physically, right? I think one of the things that's kind of working against digital is that there's a delay, I believe, in release. So Hickman's X-Men has been all about engaging it now, and so people are coming in for that more frequently. And then lastly, the other thing is that there's been a shift. This isn't the digital thing, but I think it's related. There's been a shift from trades to single issues. I think people really thought trades were going to replace single issues, and there's a total shift in where we're getting most of our gross from. It seems like people are interested in being part of that conversation, and there's something that we kind of forgot when trade started coming out in much bigger force, was that there's an entertainment value in speculating on what's going to happen next,
Yes.
right? And the entertainment value of that can only be conveyed when you're talking to somebody. Sure, Twitter and social media is a place where you can talk to people about it, but like it doesn't replace the interactive experience that we have in person. And again, that comic store is kind of that center for that. You'll kind of it. I think people will all think internally that they'd be scumbags if they didn't buy something from a comic store, just came in just to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like I would be personally, I'd be more confused than anything else. But I think unless you're just socially out of touch, you would feel that way. So you would. So I think there is another. So I think the comic books do just sell more. The other thing is that like digital can be an introduction for people. It could be a place where people can just collect because they don't have a comic book store, and then when they move into a neighborhood with a comic book store, they'll start visiting for that exact reason. I can tell you a lot of customers have said that about the store. And then lastly, from what I understand, the gross of digital, and I don't know the details on this one, but the gross in digital has been like static for the last like decade and stuff, right? And I believe they've always been operating at a loss. So I don't think resources are being shifted into digital anymore. I think the unfortunate thing is that when somebody opens up their Comixology app or their Marvel app or whatever, there could be a point, maybe they'll make an internal compromise and they start pirating it afterwards, right? It could be for financial reasons. It could be someone's introduced to digital comics through pirate sites anyway and just haven't broken that habit at all. It could also be that they don't see an internal value, and they don't value the creators and the work that they put into it. That's all conceivably there. But with digital, it hasn't been like a threat with comics. I think they've been mostly trying to work with comic book stores and stuff, and I think they've been working with comic book stores to their own detriment for the most part. I read an article on I don't know, maybe Source Magazine or something like that about how Tidal was lying about their numbers to German investors, and how they were showing that Beyonce and Kanye's albums were drawing more listens than they actually were. Right now, you present those numbers to the investors, and you're showing a larger audience that outside of the ethics. You think that there's nothing wrong with that. You're kind of, outside of the lying to people.
Right.
But you're also diminishing maybe independent artists, their take on it, because Tidal gives people a percentage based on what they listen to, right? Yeah. But ultimately, what I took away from all that was that music streaming still hasn't been lucrative, that it's all been operating at a loss. And music is much more universal than comic books are. So if music hasn't been making their money yet, I highly doubt that comic books have digitally either. So
I guess more broadly then,
yeah.
Do you think that in order for comics to expand, to grow and reach more people, that the way that we're currently doing things, relying on stores such as this, do you think it's sustainable? Do you think that there's something more that the industry can do to bring people into the fold if we're not going to say, okay, digital's the wave, let's move towards that? What do you think we can do to bring more people into this?
I think oh man, you're asking all the complicated questions. I think one of the biggest issues with comic books is it's short-sighted. There's no long-term thinking. And digital was innovative. I feel like the moment Comixology was purchased by Amazon, the innovation stopped. With the Marvel apps, there used to be like zoom-ins and a much more cinematic experience. Do you remember that they incorporated AR into their comic books at the same time?
Yes.
It's just that there wasn't immediate return on that. Like you're dedicating all these resources, you're not getting any more Marvel app downloads, let's say, and so why waste the energy to animate panels at this point? Like you have to justify, you have to, again, it's an equation. It has to like at the end, it has to show something like at the end of it. So, but that's just an example of just the short-sighted thinking. Like if you invest in something initially and it doesn't pay off, it could pay off down the line. Look at all of Karen Berger's Vertigo. Doom Patrol reached its third volume and keeps selling out now. Something that was a loss, that was constantly on the verge of cancellation in the 80s. I would say that entire library, Animal Man, same thing. The Swamp Thing, I think, was mostly successful, mostly critical acclaim. I haven't looked at numbers or anything like that. But we've lost that. I think there aren't too many positions that are maintained at the big companies outside of creators for a long time. I think like there's maybe just too much turnover in general because and people are just rushing to get their numbers and stuff up and everything. And I think no one, and we're broke, so I'm not blaming them, but I think the shift needs to be, there needs to be some long-term planning, some seeds being sown outside of what their short-term strategies are.
So you were really passionate about doing something like this, doing an interview. I remember you had asked on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you specifically want the people who are watching this now, the people who are getting to know you through this interview, what do you want them to know about the industry, about what you're trying to bring to it, and about what we can all do to make this a better space?
I think just more conversations, more people just communicating with each other. My goal on Twitter was just to just increase that circle. We all have that circle of friends. They call it a bubble, right?
The sphere of influence.
The sphere of influence, and we can all, we can all meet. We can all be part of each other's sphere and have that sphere grow, and that's part of what happens here. I think with indie creators, and just customers in general, they all have that small sphere, but hopefully through here, their sphere grows, and our sphere certainly grows. Whenever they're showcasing their art or mention that the store is that the store carries their books and stuff. So yeah.
So before we close out, can you just let the people know the exact location of the store, because I unfortunately can't remember,
Sure.
and how we can find you on the internet, your Twitter, all that jazz.
We're at 148 degrees longitude north and 37 degrees longitude east.
You got me.
I'm also probably completely wrong. We're on 1216 Union Street in Brooklyn, New York. We're a 10-minute walk from the Brooklyn Museum if you guys are in Brooklyn. We have our website, anyonecomics.com, all the social media, Anyone Comics. You can call the store 347-350-8422 if you have any questions. If I wasn't clear on where it is,
Well, thank you so much for doing the interview. I can tell you guys that are watching this that this is a place that if you're in the New York area and you're looking for a shop, there's a great place to come. It's got a vibrant energy about it, lots of people that come in and out, and I think that comic book shops that are doing more than just trying to make a dollar, that are trying to make a community, are a place that you want to find yourself in, because we do this together. And like you've been saying throughout this entire interview, there is no comics at all without the community, without the customers, and I love that this place focuses on them so much. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's kind of my ethos, actually. Sorry, it's going to be a couple of sentences. Yeah. I kind of realized at a younger age that you can definitely do things on your own and benefit and just be an opportunistic person and just work for yourself. And it could be at the cost of other people, right? And I think that's a very stupid mentality, being out for yourself. Because if you're out for other people, if you're helping your community grow, that they grow. If you're helping other people, they'll grow, and you'll grow with it. You know, in other words, like your growth. If you're keeping things to yourself, if you're trying to grow yourself, and the space around you hasn't grown, like the comics industry hasn't grown, then your growth is gonna just stop inevitably. But if you grow everything else, you have a chance to grow within it. You know, and that's what that's what smart people need to realize, I guess.
I completely agree, and I think that that's a lesson that we can all learn, especially in this community that needs a lot of growth. So again, thank you so much for doing this. I'm Sean Bartley with the Comics Pals. If you guys want more of our content, you can listen to our weekly podcast, which drops every single Monday on all podcast hosting platforms. You can check out more of our content on YouTube. And if you want us on social media, we are at the Comics Pals. You can write to us on thecomicspals@gmail.com. And if you want to continue the conversation with us, you can join our Discord, where we are always having a great time. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.